Ticker symbol VGT, or the Vanguard Information Technology ETF, is one of the highest quality, best performing ETFs I've ever came across, and is definitely an ETF that's a good contender for a long-term position if I've ever seen one. Now, VGT offers exposure into some of the fastest growing companies in the entire world and across the entire market, and allows you high quality technology exposure with a single click of the button. Now in this video, I want to overview and analyze VGT, dig a little bit deeper into this ETF, and figure out how it's done so well over so many different time frames. And then later on, I'm going to share with you guys if or if not, I'm considering adding this ETF to my portfolio sometime in 2025 or beyond. So if you're a long-term investor looking for some massive growth exposure to, like I said, some of the best, highest quality, fastest growing companies in the entire market, then make sure to stick around, drop a like down below, and let's get right into it. If you are a dividend investor who wants to level up your portfolio, you need to be tracking your dividend income consistently. And that's why I created the perfect dividend tracker that I've used to scale my dividend income up to all-time highs over the last year. Now, along with this dividend tracker, you're also going to receive my A to Z dividend investing ebook, which shows you how I personally started from $0 several years ago to now where I earn over $7,500 per month in dividends. So if you want this tracker and the ebook, go to the first link down below in my description and grab it today. Now, first things first, this ETF, of course, is brought to us by Vanguard, one of the best providers of very cheap but high quality ETFs across the entire markets. The expense ratio for VGT is 0.10%, which might seem expensive compared to something like VOO or even VYM, but still 0.1% is very cheap relatively speaking. Now, the ETF's product summary says seek to track the performance of a benchmark index that measures the investment return of stocks in the information technology sector, passively managed using a full replication strategy when possible and a sampling strategy if regulatory constraints dictate. Include stocks of companies that serve the electronics and computer industries or that manufacture products based on the latest applied science. Now, the ETF's inception date was 2004, so we have lots of historical data to go off of, and it's going to be pretty fun to backtest this one. Now, speaking of performance, this ETF has performed very well over basically every single time frame since it came out, more or less, offering investors an annualized 13-14% return, which honestly, what more can we ask for? Now, when it comes to VGT, there's 314 different positions inside this ETF. So although it offers pretty high beta exposure, there's lots of different names within it. So you're not putting all your eggs in one basket and you're still very, very well diversified. But again, you are exposed to some high growth companies. Now, the sector breakdown looks like this. For VGT, application software is 15.4%, communications equipment is 3.6%, electronic components is 1.4%, electronic equipment and instruments is 1.8%, electronic manufacturing services is 1.2%, internet services and infrastructure is 1.7%, IT consulting and other services is 3.7%, semiconductor materials and equipment is 3.4%, semiconductors makes up a large majority, 29.7%, system software 19.8%, technology distributors 0.7%, and lastly technology, hardware and storage 17.6%. Now, I know you guys are probably also wondering what are some of the biggest holdings of top tickers in this ETF, which is very important, especially if you're watching this video and you're a little bit newer to investing. You want to look through all the ETFs that you're interested into and see what stocks make up the ETFs and ask yourself, do I want exposure to those individual names or do I want exposure to none of them? Now, with VGT, the majority of the ETF looks like it's made up of 3 top names, which you guys said are Apple, Nvidia, Microsoft. Now, as far as technology goes or high growth names, there's not many better names in my opinion than those 3 names, and historically all 3 of these names have done very, very well. Now, that being said, if for whatever reason you don't want this direct exposure to any of these or all 3 of these names, then maybe VGT is not the ETF for you. But for me personally, I do believe in all 3 of these names, as well as most of them on this list. The rest of the names on this list making up again a majority of the ETF are names like Broadcom. We have Salesforce, Oracle, Advanced Micro Devices. We have Cisco, Adobe, and Accenture. Now again, there are over 300 different individual stocks in this ETF. But again, remember, the majority of this ETF are going to be made up of names like these. So if these names have really good or really bad days, weeks, quarters, years, the ETF will definitely reflect that. Now, looking deeper into VGT's performance, this is where this ETF has obviously shined over the last year and basically, again, ever since it came out, more or less. The ETF is up 1200+% in the max time frame, and again, it's been trading for quite some years, with some years allowing the ETF to grow more than others, but ever since 2022, this ETF has basically doubled. Now, year to date, it's up 32% as of right now. On the year time frame, almost up 40%. And again, this is obvious because anything high quality technology in the last year or so has done very, very well. Now in the last 5 years, it's up 176%. And basically more or less every single time I look at this one and thinking about adding some shares into my portfolio, it's basically always trading at all-time highs. Now this ETF, interestingly enough, also does pay a dividend. It's pretty small relatively speaking, but it's still something and it has been growing very slowly over the past several years. Now the 0.5% dividend that this ETF pays is probably not going to be a make it or break it on whether or not you or any investor are going to decide or not decide to buy this one, but still I wanted to throw that out there and add it inside the video. Now before we go through and back test and look at the full numbers, the full picture of VGT over the max time frame, and stay tuned because those numbers are pretty shocking. If we stack up VGT next to the S&P 500 and look at multiple different time frames, although both of these ETFs historically have been great investments, if we look, for example, year to date, VGT is winning. Over the 1 year time frame, VGT is also winning. The 3 year time frame, VGT is also winning. Now the 5 year VGT is almost doubling the S&P. The 10 year VGT is over doubling the S&P. And on the max time frame, even though the S&P has been trading for much longer, VGT and S&P are mostly neck and neck. Now, whether or not the top names inside VGT, along with the entire sector, is going to keep growing from here, or maybe we're going to have the lost decade, and most of these names could be trading sideways, your guess is as good as mine. But names like Apple, Nvidia, Microsoft, just those 3 names alone, I'm pretty bullish on over the next decade or so. Now lastly, before I go, I want to share with you guys one more piece of data, one more interesting insight about VGT. This is a $10,000 investment scenario. If an investor back when this ETF first started trading, then this is back in January of 2004. If an investor has bought $10,000 of an ETF that has the strength that VGT has had, that 10K would have turned into $155,000 plus. You heard me right, a $10,000 investment with dividends being reinvested would have turned into $155K. Now this is a total return of over 1,400%, or again on average around 14% a year, which is amazing. Now for those reasons and more, I've often said in videos, I've talked about this before, that the Vanguard Information Technology ETF might be one of the best investments for investors, especially if they're relatively young, they have a lot of time ahead of them, and they want to just compound their portfolio over and over again over the decades. Now that's of course only going to happen if the names and the sector aligns with what investors are looking for when it comes to the information technology space. But honestly, for as cheap of exposure that VGT offers you to the information technology space, this ETF is up there on my top list, maybe my top 10 ETFs that I would choose if I were to pick 10 across the entire market, at least as of right now. Now, as of right now, I currently don't own any VGT. I did sell out of my VGT a long time ago, which I definitely shouldn't have. But when we see a dip in the market, that's, I guess, if we ever see a dip in the market ever again, I will definitely load up on some more VGT because this ETF just has so much value in my opinion and allows the portfolio to compound relatively quickly. So now that we talked about one of my favorite ETFs across the entire market, the Vanguard Information Technology ETF, or ticker symbol VGT, I lastly want to hear from you guys down below. Is VGT an ETF that you currently hold on to throughout your portfolio, and or what other information technology ETFs are you holding on to that I should look into next? Drop the ticker symbols in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to please drop a like on it and subscribe for more future content like this. So if you want this tracker and the ebook, go to the first link down below in my description and grab it today. Thanks as always for stopping by, and if you are interested in investing, make sure to check out these recent videos I posted right here.